I'm talking today with Doran Barnes, Executive Director of Foothill Transit in California. Good morning, Doran.
Good morning, Doug. How are you?
I am very well, thanks. And you?
Good. Well, I'm well as also, and in this day and age, that's a good thing for both of us to be.
It certainly is.
Oh boy.
Doran, by the way, is the former chair of the Board of Directors of the American Public Transportation Association, APTA. And we'll be talking today about how he has handled what I call the Energizer-in-Chief role at Foothill Transit during COVID-19, this tremendous health crisis we're all facing these days. Why don't we begin, Doran, by you telling us a bit about yourself and about the organization you head?
Well, absolutely, and it's an honor to be with you. And thinking about the topic today, it's certainly very timely and a bit different than what we had originally talked about in terms of stakeholder relations, but very much related as well. So I'm looking forward to exploring the topic. As you mentioned, I serve as the Executive Director of Foothill Transit here in Eastern Los Angeles County. We are the primary fixed route transit operator in the San Gabriel and Pomona Valley. So geographically, if you look at our member cities, the city of Pasadena is our westernmost city. Claremont and Pomona make up our easternmost cities. It's 21 cities in all that make up the joint powers agreement that formed Foothill Transit. We are a mid-size operator, 373 transit coaches. We used to carry about 40 to 45,000 passenger boardings a day. And we'll probably come back to that because things have changed pretty dramatically in the last few weeks here. We are one of several operators here in Los Angeles County and really are part of the grand mosaic of services that make up the transit program in greater Los Angeles County. In terms of my background, I actually started in the business as a coach operator at Unitrans at UC Davis.
Oh, you did?
I did. So I spent my time behind the wheel in the dispatch office, really learned the business from the ground up. But it's been just incredibly valuable throughout my entire career. One of the other things that I do, as you well know, Doug, is that I also serve on the board of directors of Access Services. And you and I have had a chance to do some work there together also.
We have.
Topic for another day, perhaps, but certainly enjoyed my role both as an executive serving a board, serving the Foothill Transit Board, but also learned much as a board member from a governance perspective in terms of how to provide good governance.
So you've worn both hats.
I absolutely have. And,
comfortably and effectively.
Well, and I think that the two hats really have helped inform both roles. You know, serving as a transit CEO, I've learned how to better serve my board, I think, because I understand as a policymaker the kinds of decisions that have to be made, the kinds of information and process that needs to carry through, and vice versa. I've tried to be a good board member based on what I know from my professional role. So it's been very, very valuable to serve in these different capacities.
Good. Now, sir, let's look at what I call the educational dimension of the Energizer-in-Chief role. How have you played that?
Well, I think in this crisis, education, it's really, I think, a combination of education, but also in some respects, a reprioritization of our mission at its core. You know, for the longest time, we were all about how do we build ridership? How do we carry more people? How do we provide a greater impact? And that certainly is still very important. But we've really shifted now from being much less about how do we carry the greatest number of people to how do we provide services for essential workers that keep this economy, keep the critical things that are needed for our community to work moving forward. And so we've seen a roughly 70% drop in our total ridership, but we've only cut service by 18%. Now on the surface, you'd say, well, that's crazy. If you're down 70%, why not cut service by 70%? But what we're trying to do is provide social distancing to make sure that we're maintaining mobility options, making sure that those essential workers get to where they need to go. From a communication standpoint, that shift has been absolutely critical to make sure that our stakeholders understand what we're doing. Because on the surface, again, it doesn't make sense, particularly under the paradigm we were operating under 2 months ago. I've had board members, I've had community leaders say, hey, how come you're running all these empty buses? For that matter, how come you're putting out messages to the community saying, please don't ride? Again, that's, as a transit system, to say, please don't ride is crazy. But what we're trying to do, again, is to make sure we're providing essential transportation services and getting those essential workers where they need to go and doing it safely. And that's for our customers. It's also for our frontline coach operators, making sure that that safety value, that safety component of what we do is front and center. So we've had to constantly communicate this change, this shift. What are we doing? What's the thinking behind it? So that the community understands. And once we get that out there, people are really accepting of what we're doing. But it does take that communication and that education to help folks understand.
So how are you communicating with key stakeholders, and who are some of the key stakeholders you've actually been communicating with?
Well, one of the tools that we found to be the most effective is that for years and years, I've been the executive director of Foothill Transit for 21 years. Even before I got there, we've always issued a Friday report to the board that outlines, whatever might have happened during the prior week. Mm-hmm. Well, in this time of crisis, we've actually shifted that Friday communication from being kind of generally what's going on to what's going on related to this health crisis. And it really is consuming 80 to 90% of the time. So we usually have an email communication that goes out. It goes to our board, but we've actually expanded that to include a variety of other stakeholders, our city managers, some of the emergency providers, the police departments, congressional offices, legislative offices, really trying to expand that reach so that our partners know what we're doing and again, understand what the strategy is behind how all that's happening. The reach has probably increased about tenfold. And we're actually, because we run that through a newsletter portal, we're able to track who's reading it, how often they're reading it. Our open rate has really been quite phenomenal in terms of people reading it, but not only reading it, but spending time on it, coming back to it, in some cases linking out to some of the resources that we've provided there. Again, really trying to make sure that we're explaining what we're doing, that we're focusing on the essential needs in this moment in time. And again, it's been very effective in terms of those external stakeholders.
Have you used any other media in addition to email?
The other stakeholder group, of course, that's incredibly important to us, and we capture some of that group this way, but we also capture the rider group, which is an incredibly important stakeholder. We're using social media like there's no tomorrow. We're pushing out messaging through every form of social media that you can think of. So that's been an effective tool for us. We've also looked at some other communication methods that are a little bit different than what we normally do. One of the things that we've done is encouraged and now require people to wear face masks. So we've literally taken 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper and taped them on the inside window of the bus to get that message across. 2 months ago, if somebody had told me we were going to do that, I would just be aghast. How could we possibly just tape paper up on the window? But it's because it's so different, it's actually proven to be quite effective. Another tool that we're just getting ready to roll out is we've actually created some sidewalk stencils that we can use spray chalk. Chalk, of course, will wash off, but spray chalk that again reinforces the message on the ground at the stop, that talks about being safe, that talks about wearing masks, that talks about the 6 feet of distancing. So again, we're trying to use both more traditional communication methods and really some outside of the box communication methods to be able to get that message across.
Well, thank you so much. How much of your time have you spent communicating in the middle of this crisis? Your role must have changed fairly dramatically.
The role has really changed quite dramatically. How much time have we spent communicating? I don't know. It feels like about 150% of the time. I'm not sure. It's certainly been very substantial. I think we've been busier than we've ever been. I personally am doing things that I hadn't been doing before. But again, even from an internal standpoint, we're doing daily operations calls with our two operating facilities, and we do have a contracted operations scenario and our customer service center, again, just to make sure that we're coordinating. We used to do calls, every 2 weeks. So that pace of communication has really changed with that group. We're also doing daily calls with all of our department heads. Now, again, we used to have a department head meeting once every 2 weeks. What we're finding is that things are moving so fast.
Right.
Just to have that touch point is really important. It does take time, and it's been certainly a shift in how I'm using my time, but it's been very valuable.
Indeed, it's crisis management.
It is. It is.
In a very real sense.
Sometimes I get to a Friday, and as we're preparing our weekly communication to go out, I'll look back and things that we talked about on Tuesday feel like they were 2 months ago because of how quickly things are moving. And I think we're all facing that.
So your board is a key stakeholder. I assume you're keeping the board abreast of everything. You mentioned an regular email letter. How are you holding board meetings?
Well, we're like most folks, we're moving to electronic format. So we're holding board meetings using Zoom. That's been the transition. We've done a couple of, I would say, urgent board meetings where we've kind of quickly pulled people together to focus on the crisis issue of the moment. This Friday, we're actually going to do a full board meeting using Zoom. And it's not going to be just COVID-19. As we looked at the agenda, people are still moving projects forward. We actually have a pretty robust agenda, and we're going to do that via Zoom. So it'll be an experiment, but we're not the only ones. A lot of folks are working with this platform, and we're quite confident that it will work for us. In many respects, getting us to do things we didn't think we could do 2 months ago.
So Doran, communication is obviously a critical part of crisis management, if you will, but so is inspiration.
Yeah.
Calming people's fears, inspiring people. Tell us how you played that role, that dimension of the Energizer role.
I think there's, this whole situation just creates a lot of anxiety. People want certainty, they want a direction, they want to know, this is how things will likely unfold. This is the date at which all this ends. And we haven't had that. Every day brings new challenges. In light of that, I've tried to really lean back harder than ever on our values as a guiding point, on our mission as a guiding point, and really reinforce to our team that those are the things that they should be looking to as they're making the day-by-day, minute-by-minute decisions. We reflect on that in a variety of ways. One of the things that I've started doing, and I'm not sure this is sustainable in the long run, but because we have all of our administrative team working basically from home, I send out a morning message every morning that is a reflection on something that's happening. I've talked about our values. I've talked about how our values link out. I've talked about the uncertainty and what we're doing to plan for that. We've also continued to do things like recognize birthdays and anniversaries and continue to celebrate our people. So really trying to make sure that we're leaning back on those values has been important. And in fact, we're actually rewriting a couple of the values based on what we've learned. One of the things we found is that we really are committed to pulling the team and holding the team together. And we're rewriting one of those values to more clearly reflect that in the words to match up with what we're actually doing.
Great. So inspiration is very much values driven.
For me and for our organization, it is. And I think that we've always been very value and mission driven as an organization, but it's in these times of crisis where, for example, we start with the value of safety, critical in our business for everything that we do. As we're looking at things like acquiring personal protective gear and spending money on those kinds of things, a natural hesitation might be, hey, this isn't necessarily in the budget, or can I really do this? But reflecting back on that value to say, look, safety is our most important value. it says, yeah, we should go ahead and make those expenditures. We should do those things. We should go the extra mile to provide protection to folks to the greatest extent that we can. And that carries itself out again in so many different ways. When people are working remotely, you've got to reinforce those values so that they really understand that that drives what they should be doing from a decision making.
Now, you mentioned the celebratory aspect of inspiration or inspirational leadership. Tell me a bit about that. How do you celebrate?
Well, you know, an interesting thing for us, we, for our administrative team, which is a group of about 50 people, we used to do, prior to the crisis, we had a stand-up meeting every morning at, we called it the 8:08 meeting. 8:08 a.m. we kicked it off. It was a stand-up meeting, lasted about 10 minutes. And it was a chance for folks to, you know, briefly talk about if they were going to be out of the office, if they had something special going on, gave us a chance to come together and connect. We would also recognize birthdays and anniversaries at that event. Well, of course, we're not doing that because we're not at the office. So what we're doing now is recognizing those in my morning message so that everyone knows, you know, hey, it's Bob's birthday, or hey, it's Betty's anniversary. And then separate from that, we're sending e-cards to the folks that are celebrating on that particular day. Again, just to let them know that we're thinking of them and that we appreciate what they're doing. I'd much rather be able to tell somebody or wish somebody, you know, happy anniversary or happy birthday in person, but you know, we're adapting to the moment.
Right. Not possible.
Not possible. Yeah.
Today's world, at any rate.
That's it.
Well, sir, from this crisis, COVID-19, what lessons have you learned about crisis management that you would like to share with your colleagues around the country?
Well, I think there's a few things that certainly we've learned, I've learned coming through this. One is that in the moment of crisis, you have to move quickly. And we've certainly seen that. Decisions that we might ponder over in the past, the speed of everything has to go fast.
Right.
So that's certainly a critical lesson. The second thing is the value of our transit community is more important than ever. I think as a broader transit community across the country, we've been more connected than ever. We're sharing best practices. We're sharing ideas. We've done a number of things that I'd like to say, you know, we independently thought up and put in place, but in fact, you know, somewhere somebody said, hey, we're thinking about, or we're trying, or we're doing this, which sparked the idea to say, hey, we're going to do that too. So for example, we were one of the earlier systems to go to the rear door boarding to provide a level of protection between our coach operators and our customers. A lot of other systems have done that. We're not all doing the same things, but we're certainly learning from each other and sparking ideas from each other. So again, the second thing is the value of our transit community. I think the third thing is that this crisis has certainly demonstrated that things we didn't think we could do, we actually can do. And to give you an example of that, our administrative team works on a 980 schedule, meaning that it's every other Monday we close the office. The opposite Monday we work 8 hours and then 9 hours every other day of the week. So you get the 80 hours in over a 2-week period. About 6 months ago, I'd asked our human resources team about the concept of having our team members work from home on that one Monday that we do work. So one day out of a 2-week period, people would work from home. I looked at the proposal, I looked at the moving parts, and I said, oh, this is way too complicated. We can never pull this off. Well, guess what? In a period of about 2 days, we went from working from working in the office every day to working at home every single day. And we've been doing that for the last month. Fact of the matter is, we're still getting things done. We're still moving the program forward. And not just in a crisis mode. Again, we're also taking care of the things that are on our program to be doing above and beyond or as part of our regular workday. So I think there are things that sometimes we think we can't do that if we push ourselves a little harder, we can actually accomplish and actually make happen.
What are some of the implications post-COVID-19 of this learning?
As we look into our crystal ball, I think we're we're going to move out of this crisis phase, but we're going to move into a phase of transition, I think. Social distancing is likely going to continue to be required. We're going to have to change the way we do business, and it may not be the way we're doing it today, but it's certainly going to not be the way we were doing it 2 months ago either. So I think in terms of learnings, we're already starting to explore the concept of having our team members do more work from home. It may not be every day, but it may be 50% of the time. We've actually demonstrated that this can work. And doing this means that people aren't traveling to and from the office. They're not spending that time commuting. They can focus more on their family, on their home life, on other things. It has a sustainability impact in that people aren't having that carbon impact of moving from home to work. And I think as we look to a broader community, I think we really have to re-examine, what is this teaching us, not only from a transit agency standpoint, but from a community standpoint that allows us to have some of these positive things that have come out continue.
So in a very real sense, you've enhanced your capability.
Absolutely.
To manage and lead a very complex organization.
I think we've enhanced our capabilities. We've learned new skills. We've learned how to use new tools like Zoom, which we're using almost nonstop now.
Everyone's Zooming these days.
Everyone is Zooming. That's the name of the game. As we go forward, I think there are going to continue to be very challenging issues and questions we're going to have to grapple with. I don't know that we're going to be able to go back to carrying the same passenger loads that we carried 6 months ago. If you have to maintain social distancing on a bus, we have to completely redefine what a full load on a transit coach is. It used to be that, our goal was to get every seat filled and maybe a few standees was sort of the ideal sweet spot. Well, in the current health situation,
right,
that's not going to happen. And so, we've kind of gone from a route that has 10 boardings or 10 customers on board might be a subject for cancellation or reconfiguration in the old days. Now a bus that has 10 passengers might be overcrowded. And that's not going to change overnight. That's going to be something we're going to have to grapple with over the next, over this period until the COVID-19 virus is no longer a threat. And from what I'm gleaning, that's not going to happen overnight.
So what have you found most challenging, sir, in this crisis management you've been engaged in with COVID-19? What?
I think probably the most challenging thing is that there just aren't enough hours in the day to touch all the touch points that I'd like to be able to connect with. Every day seems to be, a constant series of connections and meetings, and yet there's even more that needs to be done that I'd like to be able to be doing. And so it's really been a matter of moving through the crisis, but now as we continue to move forward in this period, really thinking about how do I further recalibrate where I'm spending my time, how I'm spending my time, and making sure that all of the stakeholders get the right amount of attention. So that's not terribly new, but it's certainly, we need about a 40-hour day every 24 hours to squeeze it all in.
Well, I'm thinking we should let you get back to work, Doran. I want to thank you for taking the time from what I know is a tremendously busy schedule to share your experience with us on being Energizer-in-Chief of Foothill Transit.
Glad to be with you and glad to share a few thoughts, and certainly an interesting time, an exciting time, a challenging time, and most important, just want everyone to stay safe and be well.
And you stay safe and be well. And thank you again.
My pleasure.
Take care.
You too.